There are people waking up today only because their alarm clock lied louder than their will to stay asleep forever. And they'll shower, dress up, and go to work. Like life makes sense. Like they weren't silently hoping a truck would hit them on the way. Nobody talks about it, but everyone's felt it. We're told to appreciate life, to chase dreams, to be grateful for another day. But here's the thing. Most people aren't living. They're just too scared to stop. They're locked in cycles of obligation, numbed by routine, driven by fear, disguised as ambition. Think about it. If life really was worth it, why does every society have entire industries built to distract us from it? Why do we need entertainment, religion, medication, motivation, therapy, sex, alcohol, and capitalism all screaming at us 24/7 just to survive being awake? Because reality, when seen clearly, is unbearable. And we know this, not intellectually, biologically. You can feel it in your bones every time silence gets too loud, every time joy feels rented, every time success tastes like cardboard. We smile for photos, but we're bleeding internally. We achieve goals, then we're hollow again. We fall in love, then we panic. What if this person sees who I really am, and yet the script never changes? Push forward, be strong, keep going. But maybe, just maybe, we weren't meant to. Maybe all this pretending is the problem. Maybe life isn't some treasure we're too blind to see. Maybe it was never worth it to begin with. This video isn't here to comfort you. It's here to confront you. Because once we rip the mask off meaning, all that's left is the truth. And you deserve that much. Let's begin. Hope is not a virtue. It's anesthesia, a sophisticated form of sedation that convinces slaves to keep pulling the cart, smiling. No chains, just dreams. They say hope is what keeps us alive. That's a damning indictment if you think about it. Because anything that keeps you alive without curing what's killing you is not saving you. It's stalling you. Mikhail Artsybashev, a name they don't teach in schools, once wrote, "Hope is the sugar coating on a poisoned pill. It makes you swallow faster." And that's exactly what it does. Hope turns a collapsing marriage into, maybe things will get better. Hope turns a dead-end job into, I'm sure they'll notice me eventually. Hope turns war zones into, after this election, we'll finally have peace. It doesn't solve, it delays. The system doesn't run on truth. It runs on the strategic placement of carrots just out of reach. Economic mobility, spiritual fulfillment, soulmates, meaning. These aren't destinations, they're bait. We call hopeless people broken. But what if they're just clear-eyed? What if hope is a mental disorder dressed up as optimism? The philosopher Lev Shestov understood this. He rejected reason, progress, and even the idea of salvation. For him, the real tragedy wasn't despair. It was the lie that things must improve for life to be tolerable. Hope is how society manufactures compliance. You won't riot if you think tomorrow might be better. You won't leave if you believe you're almost there. You won't question if you're still on your way. We are, all of us, haunted by the not yet successful, not yet loved enough, not yet healed. But once you step outside that hallucination, you see it clearly. The ladder never ends, because it's not supposed to. The most functional people in this world aren't the happiest. They're the most committed to the illusion. And those who've stopped hoping, they're not weak. They're dangerous because they've seen through it. No fantasies, no recovery arc, just the raw texture of existence, unfiltered. Hope didn't build this world. Hope keeps it from burning down. If a rat keeps running through a maze that has no exit, we call it desperate. When a human does the same thing, we call it brave. To wake up each day and continue as if life owed you meaning is not noble. It's delusional, We glorify endurance like it's a sacred virtue. But endurance of what? A cycle that repeats itself until your body gives out? A treadmill of goals that don't survive the grave? Continuing just because you're already here is not a reason. It's inertia. The Russian writer Mikhail Artsybashev, in his novel Sanin, created a character who refused to suffer for any ideal, family, or nation. He lived by the principle, there is no point in sacrificing a real life for a fictional good. Society read this and called it dangerous, because it was, because it asked the forbidden question, why are you still playing a game that doesn't reward you? This chapter isn't an ode to suicide. It's worse. It's a demand for honesty. If the desire to give up surfaces in you, that isn't sickness. It might be the last sane reflex in a world pathologically obsessed with progress. The will to quit is the mind recoiling from absurdity. Biology wires us to persist, but philosophy exists to question the instinct. And philosophy, unlike biology, doesn't care whether you survive the answer. Consider this. People aren't falling apart because they're lazy or weak. They're breaking because they followed the rules. Because they climbed the mountain and found the view was empty. Because they acquired everything and still felt nothing. And the cruelest twist? They're told to keep going. Keep fighting. Push through. For what? Another round of the same? You can only gaslight a person into endurance for so long. The will to quit is clarity. It's not failure. It's not depression. It's the psyche declaring, I see what this is. I'm not playing anymore. And that's precisely why it's taboo. Because if too many people accept that conclusion, the entire architecture of this world, from family to labor to law, collapses. So quitting becomes the new heresy. Not quitting life necessarily, but quitting the illusion that there's something heroic about enduring meaninglessness. Every prison requires one thing: inmates who don't remember how they got in. You were brought into this world as an accident, or worse, a project. A canvas for someone else's unresolved longing, a placeholder for a dream they never chased, a future therapist, a retirement plan, a second chance at their own failed childhood. No one asked you. No one could. And yet here you are, expected to justify your own existence, to be grateful for a life you never requested. Let's be direct. Birth is the original violation, and what follows is a lifelong attempt to rationalize that trespass. Some call it a gift, but only because it's considered impolite to admit you're being slowly unwrapped by time and stripped of everything: joy, youth, health, clarity, until you're no longer recognizable even to yourself. And those who question this are branded ungrateful. But the truth is, ingratitude is the only rational response to being shoved into a collapsing system with no exit and no say. The Russian author Varlam Shalamov, who endured 17 years in the gulags, wrote, "A human being survives not by strength, but by forgetfulness. The system relies on you forgetting the absurdity of your origin, forgetting that pain began before language, before memory, as screams in a delivery room. This is not a metaphor. It's biology. Studies in neonatal trauma and prenatal stress epigenetics confirm it. The suffering doesn't wait until you're old enough to understand. Your cells know. Your cortisol levels know. Your nervous system has been bracing since day one. And still, you're told to make the most of it. That's the curse. You inherit a body wired for decay, thrown into a world driven by competition, tethered to a culture that only values what you produce. And then, when you begin to crack under the weight, they ask, why are you so negative? Because you were born into a trap. Because you're expected to perform gratitude for a sentence you didn't appeal. Because the crime of your birth was committed without your consent, and the punishment is your entire life. And what's more violent than that? Not war, not poverty, not death. At least those things offer closure. Birth is an infinite conscription into a war you never declared. And the fact that this idea is offensive to most people doesn't make it wrong. It only proves how deep the brainwashing goes. A lie doesn't need to be loud to work. It just needs to sound like something you want to believe, right when you're at your weakest. Purpose was never discovered. It was installed, like software, to overwrite your instinct to rebel. They told you to find your why, but they never told you that your confusion was natural, that your disorientation was not a problem to be solved, but a signal, that you were seeing reality without filters. Purpose is not meaning. Purpose is a coping mechanism that's been industrialized, monetized, and spiritualized until it became indistinguishable from truth. Andrea Emo, the Italian philosopher who never published a word in his lifetime, once wrote, "We fabricate meaning because chaos is not survivable, and yet chaos is all there is." He wasn't exaggerating. He was acknowledging the raw structure of existence, randomness, repetition, entropy. Everything else is ornament. Purpose tells you to endure suffering because it matters. But suffering doesn't need a purpose. It persists just fine without one. It grows, multiplies, adapts. The world doesn't need your purpose. You need your purpose. Because without it, you'd have to face the full weight of the void. And most people can't do that without screaming. This is why religions invented souls, why corporations invented missions, why influencers sell alignment. Because an empty animal that knows it's empty is unprofitable. We do not fear death. We fear purposelessness, which is worse than death because it doesn't end. It lingers. It wakes up with you. It eats breakfast beside you. And no vision board can shut it up for long. Even children are assigned purposes before they can speak. You're special. You'll make a difference. You'll change the world. These are not affirmations. They're psychological straitjackets. The Russian philosopher Lev Shestov argued that true freedom can only begin after the destruction of reason, order, and purpose. Not before, not during, only after. But that kind of freedom doesn't sell. It can't be posted. It can't be monetized. And worst of all, it can't be controlled. So the lie must continue. You must believe there's a reason for your pain. You must believe your job is meaningful. You must believe your suffering will one day make sense. Because if you don't, you stop playing. And when you stop playing, the entire system begins to rot. Purpose isn't there to uplift you. It's there to bind you to a career, a partner, a belief, a future. It's there to keep you obedient, productive, predictable. Purpose isn't the antidote to the void. It's a leash that makes the void tolerable. When the lights go out in a theater, you don't see darkness. You see the room for what it really is. Ugly, quiet, pointless. The final layer isn't death, it's indifference, not apathy. That's emotional fatigue. But pure indifference. The collapse of all categories. Where good and evil, pain and pleasure, gain and loss, identity and absence, all become noise. It doesn't feel dramatic. It feels silent. And that silence is terrifying to the system because it can't be marketed, preached, or regulated. You don't need guidance if nothing is leading anywhere. You don't need hope if there's nowhere to arrive. That's the unspoken fear at the root of every ideology, every institution, every morning ritual. What if none of this matters? And never did. Thomas Ligotti, in The Conspiracy Against the Human Race, describes human consciousness as a maladaptive trait, a biological accident that allows a species to realize its own emptiness and still keep walking. What we know is a joke, and we know it's a joke, yet we still fall for it. That is the curse of being human. But here's the paradox. When you truly accept that nothing matters, you're not paralyzed. You're untethered, untouchable, unbribable, unmanipulated. Because what can be sold to a person who wants nothing? What power can be held over someone who sees through it all? What threat works against someone who doesn't care if they win or lose? This isn't nihilism as destruction. It's nihilism as clarity. The kind of clarity that doesn't scream. It whispers. The kind that doesn't seek followers, likes, or applause. Because it knows those are just ornaments for the dying. And still, here you are. Breathing, watching, thinking. Not because you chose life, not because it means something, but because consciousness continues, even after the myth is gone. And in that space, that raw, hollow space, something strange happens. Not hope, not joy, just permission. Permission to stop chasing, to stop performing, to stop pretending. And maybe that's what freedom was all along. Not the power to do anything, but the strength to admit there's nothing left to do. If you've made it this far, it means something. Not about life, but about you. Your courage to look straight into what most people spend their whole lives avoiding. This channel exists for minds like yours. Restless minds, honest minds. Minds that don't settle for shallow answers or pretty lies. But the truth is, creating this kind of content is hard. Not just emotionally, but practically. And if we're being honest, we need support to keep going. Becoming a channel member is more than unlocking perks. It's a statement. It says, this matters. Not because it's comforting, but because it's real. Membership helps us survive the algorithm, the shadow bans, the demonetizations, all the quiet ways platforms silence difficult truths. It allows us to keep making what most people are too afraid to say out loud. And to those of you who are already members, thank you. You're the backbone of this space. You're not just supporting a creator. You're protecting a voice that refuses to lie. If you feel moved, if you feel seen, you can also tap Super Thanks to show support in a one-time way. Every bit helps, more than you know. But even if you do none of that, if all you do is watch, think, feel, and share, you're already helping this grow. You're part of this. And we see you. This space only exists because of people like you. People who don't just want content. They want truth, no matter how heavy it gets. Thank you for being here.